Welcome back to Media7, where I'm talking with cartoonist Trace Hodgson and Rod Emmerson and editorial illustrator Anna Crichton. Now, it's a time-honoured tradition in politics, but it appears that the current Prime Minister is coping no better with the cooling of his honeymoon with the media than his predecessors did. Jose Barbosa chronicles the end of a fine romance.
As the CEO of New Zealand Corp, John Key has a job that requires massive amounts of media engagement. He's the ultra-visible PM, constantly on show, gliding among us with the winsome charm of an easy-buy catalogue model. And he's needed the media to deliver the message that the country's in the right pair of hands. Unfortunately for John, events conspire to mess up his vibe.
The cup of tea turned sour. The discovery that a secret recording had been made of the meeting between John Key and John Banks.
You realise, I mean, that there'd be lots of people just desperate to know what was said. I mean, it fuels itself.
It was extremely bland, trust me.
He was right. When the recording was leaked online, everyone's response was to say, "Oh," and then check to see if they had any messages on their phone. But it marked a change in the PM's relationship with a mostly cosy media.
Once you start news of the world tactics in New Zealand from a tabloid like the Herald on Sunday, you just encourage them to do it everywhere else.
And we got a glimpse of his admittedly brilliant way of deflecting sustained and hard questioning.
Thanks very much. Good afternoon.
And recently, while being interviewed by Baron Greenback, we learnt the wounds haven't healed.
Well, the Herald's turned more tabloid. They brought David Fisher over from the Herald on Sunday. He's an investigative journalist, so-called.
And you were handling the pressure all right, you think?
Yeah, I like it.
The media strategy blocked out for Key is to steer him away from any platform where genuine and tough questioning might enter the conversation. So checkpoint is out, but breakfast is in.
Sure. Thank you very much for your time.
See you in Wellington soon.
Yes, enjoy it. Look forward to it.
And they've got this infinity pool on the top of whatever it is, like 70 stories. Unbelievable.
And gone fishing is definitely in.
Prime Minister John Key has very little downtime. So when we set a date to go fishing, I was determined to ensure that he had a great day.
Unfortunately, the fish were less than obliging, the pescatorial prey ignoring Key's siren call.
What'd you get?
So the Prime Minister, with very little downtime, managed to find space in his schedule to head out a second time. And this time, he landed photo opportunity gold.
It's a monster.
But at the very least, the audience was transfixed as Key was coached through the proceedings like a 2-year-old starting potty training.
Lift and wind. It's nice and smooth. That's the way.
But perhaps his minders are right to keep him out of harm's way. Recently, a reported 5,000 people marched on Parliament to protest asset sales. That's genuine street-level opposition. This was his response.
How many people did they have? Okay, where was it? Oh, okay. No, I wasn't aware of it.
I feel I should giggle. Now, Trace, you haven't been doing John Key any favours lately either. Not that we would expect you to. Let's look at a recent cartoon that you've done featuring John Key and Bill English. You've drawn them as grotesques, haven't you? Have you ever drawn a flattering picture of a politician?
I don't think I could, to be honest. So, well, they don't lend themselves to it, do they? They're not exactly a pretty bunch.
The way you draw John Key has raised the ire of some people. You draw him with a very long nose and the close-set eyes, and people have looked at that and said, that's pretty much the stereotypical racist caricature of Jews. Have you encountered that?
Yes, yes,
before?
I
What's
have.
your response?
Well, I started drawing him like that before I even knew he had Jewish ancestry or his mother was Jewish, so to me he's just another politician, not anybody. I mean, I certainly don't look at anybody on a racial level, you know. I just draw them, enhance their features.
Is he hard to draw?
Not really. I mean, a lot of people look at my caricatures and say they don't look like him, but I mean, I think they do, and you know, his nose isn't small, really. I think, and his eyes are pretty close set, really.
Rod, how do you find Key to draw?
Well, I found him quite challenging because he had quite a bland face. The rule of thumb, it takes about 100 drawings before you actually nail someone's face. And 100 came and went, and I still wasn't happy, So I started working on doing some serious work on his features, and then I saw an English cartoonist, Rosen, I think it was, who draws Cameron with a condom on his head. And I thought, this guy's onto something. and so I started to smooth his face out quite a lot, and then with and not having any racial overtones, but I put that little Jewish sort of hairstyle on him. Instead of the cap, I've actually got this sort of hair that could sort of, the hairline sort of finishes.
I think it's a little bit hard. It's maybe a little bit hard for people to accept that there's no racial undertones, and yet the way you've described it is, it is that, isn't it?
Well, it could be. I don't know. No, I'm not worried. I'm honestly not worried. It's trying to actually pictorialise this guy, and if you can't get it, it doesn't matter. I mean, the world is littered with cartoonists who actually can't draw for the life of them. It's not the cartoon, it's what you're trying to say. There's some great cartoonists out there who can't draw for nuts, but have got a great sense of reality, and can grab those words and pull them all together and throw it into a sketch, and there you go.
Well, let's actually have another look at one that you drew recently, and you were making a pretty strong statement. This is John Key as a prostitute.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was one of those days that the story was hot on the lips, and I was listening to all this debate and reading acres of material on it. And there was no other way to perceive it, but, he's hawking this. And I thought, well, a prostitute's probably a good way to do it. So while everyone else around me, because I'm working with people who are some of the smartest journalists in New Zealand, and there's me quietly drawing the Prime Minister with boobs and in a short dress and getting it published. It's a bit of
good day's work then. Now, Anna, you don't do editorial cartooning as such, but you have done quite a few caricatures of people. Are your subjects reluctant subjects when it comes to that? I imagine people might be quite scared of being caricatured.
I think on the whole, politicians and public figures, they generally like it. I know in Australia, especially, they loved it. They loved the attention. There was one occasion when I came back to New Zealand. It was Teresa Gattung. I can't pronounce her name properly. And I think it was Sunday Star Times asked me to do a caricature of her in context, some story happening within the caricature. And I'd started, but then I got a phone call saying, oh, Teresa doesn't want a caricature. And I thought the head of Telecom would probably, would normally have loved that if it had been in Australia. And I found that very odd. But that was quite a long time ago. Maybe she was just a little bit too vain, perhaps. It wasn't a political thing, I'm not sure.
I do want to get this in because I gather it's a good story. Can we see your cock and balls again?
I'll show you them metaphorically if you wish.
Now, you drew this for an Australian publication, I gather.
Yeah, I worked on The Australian for 3 years as part of an in-house team of very rowdy bunch of cartoonists and caricaturists and illustrators. It was in-house, it was great. But this was to illustrate a piece on films, movies, and how it's very, at that time anyway, it was very rare that you saw male genitals. So I thought, well, what better than to, but you see the female genitals. So I just took the male genitals and covered them in armoury like they were untouchable, impenetrable. And it was quite a while ago, and they're on the boards. It was before they used the computer to put everything together. And all of the pages were set up, and the editor of that section walked by and said, nope, we can't have that. And it was quite bizarre
Which,
because
in a way,
it was very telling.
In a way,
it reflected
kind of
the
illustrated
actual...
your point
Oh, it did.
more than you could ever have hoped to.
So I had to really quickly, within like an hour, draw something else. And I drew a cup of tea.
That's bizarre, because this is the same publication that was running Larry Pickering. The stuff you saw before.
I think the editor must have been impotent.
And
Surely.
I think we've seen the sensitivity there on the part of politicians in particular with this whole thing that's sprung up around Jacob Zuma, the president of South Africa, who, and this isn't even published. This is a painting in a gallery showing him with his cock and balls out, and he's going to court over that.
A bit more than that. So it goes back a little bit further than that, though. I've met Jonathan Shapiro in Canberra some years back. He's a very challenging cartoonist living in very challenging times in a very challenging place. The cartoon that Zuma hates is the rape one. Well, Zuma was charged with rape and got off, right? But Shapiro hasn't let it go and continues to draw him. In fact, he did one cartoon with Themis, Lady Justice, being held to the ground while Zuma was standing above her about to rape her. And he's got the little shower rose on his head, and the whole reason for the shower rose is because the woman that was supposedly raped had a shower after the rape so that she may not get AIDS. When Zuma was finally exonerated in that court case, she fled the country and now lives in the Netherlands. He's taken Shapiro to court, and it goes to court in October at the end of this year.
Well, perhaps we should all be grateful we live in a slightly safer place than that. Thank you, Trace Hodgson, Rod Emmerson and Anna Crichton. And finally, the Canon Media Awards ceremony was held last Friday, and among those honoured was John Stevenson. His Metro magazine feature, Eyes Wide Shut, was named Best Investigation. John wasn't at the do, he's back working in Afghanistan, but we hope his latest honour might have pricked the conscience of the Prime Minister and others who questioned his credibility when the story was published. It's the holding to account that counts. And that's our show. We'll be back with Media7 at the same time next week. Until then, goodbye.